What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. We continue with our 2023 schedule preview and projected record series. The Clemson Tigers are up next. Just got the ACC schedules last night, the Big 12 schedules today, so now we can start to do some of the top teams out of the ACC and Big 12. Don't worry, we're going to try to get to every single Power 5 team in this series. But let's get to Clemson here. Before we look at the 2023 schedule, let's look back at 2022. Here was the schedule from last season. You can see an 11-3 record overall, 10-2 in the regular season. But you look back at this schedule and you see, Wake Forest was on the road, Florida State was on the road. Remember that Georgia Tech game? It was a little bit close early on. They played them on the road, Boston College on the road. But really, Notre Dame, Florida State, those were the two tough road games last year. They took care of business at home until they got to the end against South Carolina. Just a really difficult loss there to close out the season, close out the regular season, and potentially keep them out of the college football playoff. But again, when you look at the schedule overall, Notre Dame and South Carolina in the non-conference, it really wasn't that bad. Wake Forest, again, and Florida State on the road, the Notre Dame game on the road, but a very manageable schedule. And you look to 2023, it's going to be a little bit tougher, I think. No divisions anymore, so you're just going to play the 8 conference games from however they're scheduled, and the top 2 teams will go to the ACC championship. And in the non-conference, it's very similar to last year. They're going to play Charleston Southern, Florida Atlantic, a couple of easy games there. But you'll flip Notre Dame and South Carolina, so this year Notre Dame will be at home. You'll play South Carolina on the road. So those are the 2 big non-conference games. And when you play a Power 5 rival, like Clemson plays South Carolina, Florida State plays Florida, and then you still schedule a big non-conference game against another Power 5 team. I realize Notre Dame's not in the Power 5, but the same caliber. And also the ACC schedules that. But, when they don't play Notre Dame, they usually always play a big Power 5 opponent. But I give a lot of respect to that, and I think that's a big reason why, people talk about the 9-game conference schedule. If the ACC played a 9-game conference schedule and you have a team like South Carolina on the schedule already, will teams like Clemson play another big non-conference game? Probably not. So that's something interesting there, and one of the, I guess, pros to having an 8-game conference schedule. But you look to 2023 here, week by week. All right, this is a tricky game to start off the season. They'll play on Labor Day night on the road at Duke. Duke is a team that finished the season really, on a high note this past year. They didn't get blown out by anyone. They were close in every game. The losses that they did have, they were very close. Had some very good wins last year. And I've been looking at this team, kind of breaking down their roster already, going through and doing my rosters. And they've got a decent amount coming back. Duke's probably going to be a pretty good team this year, and a team that maybe I should have considered for my way too early top 25. This is going to be a quality team. You play them on the road, national television here, big game on Labor Day night. This is going to be, and I say national television, the spotlight will be on this game. There will be no other games at that time. This is a huge opportunity for Duke, and it is a tricky situation for Clemson. Again, this I think could be a very good game. Not an easy win to start off the season. Clemson should be the better team, and if they play to the level that they are capable of playing, they should win this game, but you never know. I wonder what the crowd will be like for Duke. They built some momentum last year. That'll be interesting. But after that, they'll play Charleston Southern, Florida Atlantic, should be easy wins. And then you go with Florida State here on September 23rd. So they will play them early in the year. And I think a big reason why is because the ACC wanted to get this game over with early on, because if you finish the regular season and you've got a 12-0 Clemson or a 12-0 Florida State and the other team is 11-1, the loss came to the other team, or maybe they're both 11-1 at the end of the season, it gives that team that loses a chance to climb back up in the rankings. A late season loss perhaps would make it tough on them to get back into the playoff picture. But playing that game early, I think both teams will still be very much alive in the playoff race. I feel pretty confident that a one-loss ACC champion will get in the playoff this year, but we'll see how it plays out. But yeah, Florida State there, September 23rd. Then on the road at Syracuse, a team that has given Clemson fits for whatever reason. So that will not be easy. Looking at the month of September there, you've got Florida State. That's the marquee matchup. But don't sleep on Duke and Syracuse. Those are going to be tricky games. Next, they go into the month of October with a home game against Wake Forest. No Sam Hartman. You would think Clemson should be in pretty good shape for that one, especially playing at home. Then they get a bye week before back-to-back road games. I don't like this if I'm a Clemson fan. Really, this 3-game stretch. Miami on the road, NC State on the road, and then Notre Dame. I think it'll be very tough for Clemson to come out of those 3 games without a loss. I mean, again, they should be better than Miami, but that's a road game. And then you have another road game against NC State, who I think could be a very quality team this year, probably a top 25 team, and that's a tough place to play. If you get past those 2 games, then you have to play Notre Dame, and we know Sam Hartman has had some success against this Clemson defense, so that'll be a tough test. Those 3 games, very tough in a row. And then you have Georgia Tech on the 11th. This is a team that played a little better towards the end of last year, so that might not be an easy win. You got to face Drake May there on the 18th. Of course, he didn't do a whole lot last year against Clemson. We'll see what happens this time. Good news there is that's a home game for Clemson, so you feel pretty good about it. And then they'll close things out on the road at South Carolina. So all in all, this schedule is actually pretty tough. It's tougher than some of the ones Clemson has had in recent years. Maybe that's partially because of getting rid of divisions, but Duke on the road, Miami on the road, Syracuse and NC State on the road. They'll be favored in all those games, but they're all tricky. Those are tricky matchups there. Florida State and Notre Dame, the 2 toughest opponents more than likely, are at home, so that's the good news. But then again, they do have to play South Carolina on the road, and don't forget about, again, Wake Forest, North Carolina. Just a lot of games here that could give Clemson a challenge. They're going to be favored maybe in every single game, but again, a lot of games that will be pretty tough, and it's a pretty challenging schedule for Clemson in 2023. Here were the projections from last season, a 10-2 regular season for them. That's right where their projection was when we did our projection. I predicted them to go 11-1. I did have them losing the ACC championship, so if you throw that game in there and you say 11-2, my prediction would have been right, but didn't go exactly how I expected it to go. The FBI projected them to go 11.1 and 1.6, so basically 11-1. That would include an ACC championship game as well. And then the over-under was at 10.5. So it really felt like this team was going to be 10-2 or 11-1. That's what it looked like in the preseason. We'll see what the projection looks like for this year. This is the schedule again, and this is the scale that we'll be using. So if the game, if it stays in the white, that's a 50-50 game, a game where I think the spread will be less than a touchdown. Less than 20, over 80, games where I think the spreads will be 20 or more points. 61 to 70s, 30 to 39%. Those are games where I think it'll be a double-digit spread, 10 to 19 points in that range. And then the 20, 29, 71, 80% games, those are games where I think the spread will be about a touchdown, 6, 7, 8 points in that range. So let's get to it here, starting with the easy wins. You got 2 of them, Charleston Southern, Florida Atlantic. Tigers should be favored by 20 or more in both of these games. Really shouldn't be a test at all in either one of these matchups. So those are 2 wins you can count on, I think. And then you look at games where I think they'll be favored by double digits. I'm going to go with Wake Forest and Georgia Tech. No Sam Hartman at Wake Forest. Playing at home, you feel like Clemson will be at least a 10-point favorite in that game, 10 to 13 points probably. Georgia Tech maybe closer to 17, but not guaranteed wins necessarily, but games that Clemson should win. It would be a pretty big shock if they were to lose either one of those games. So that gives you 4 wins that you can, I wouldn't say you can count on, but you feel really good about these 4 games. That means there's 8 games still on this schedule that Clemson could potentially lose. It's a pretty tricky schedule. We're going to go to the games in the 61 to 70% range. Again, these are games I think the spread will be around a touchdown. You got Duke, Syracuse, Miami, NC State. All 4 of those games on the road. That's a big reason why they are in this category. I think those games at home, maybe some of them would be closer to the 71 to 80% range. But playing on the road, those will be tricky games. North Carolina, the one home game we've got here, just because I think North Carolina has a chance to be pretty good. But you look at Duke, I think Clemson will be favored by about 8 points. Syracuse, same thing. Miami, same thing. NC State, it might be closer to 6 points. That game is, I think, closer to a 50-50 game than any of the other games. And then North Carolina probably about an 8-point favorite there. So they'll be the clear favorite in all 5 of these games, I feel like, but not a huge favorite. And when you have that many of those types of games, chances are you're going to lose 1 or 2 of them. And that's what you're going to see here in the projection in just a second. And then that leaves Florida State, Notre Dame, and at South Carolina. So Florida State, I think we all feel like that's a 50-50 game. Clemson should be favored because they're at home. Same thing with Notre Dame. But I don't think they'll be favored by more than 4 or 5 points in both of those games. And then South Carolina, Clemson, you still kind of feel like they're a tier above South Carolina. But it's a rivalry game. South Carolina just beat them last year, and this time it's on the road. You put all that together, and yeah, I'm going to call that a 50-50 game. I do think Clemson will be favored in that one, but not by much. And so that's kind of the story here for Clemson. I think they'll be favored in every single game that they play, but that they won't be favored by a lot. They're going to more than likely have a lot of close games, and when you have a lot of close games, the odds tell you that you're going to lose some of those close games, and that's what you're going to see in this projection. Again, keep in mind, this is not my prediction. I don't do predictions until usually May, at least for sure after spring practice and all that. And I do feel like my prediction is going to be a little bit higher than this, but when you average these all out, the games in the pink I use 65%, the games in the white 50%, the blue and the green, those games are counted as wins. And when you average it out, the projection is actually 9-3 for Clemson. So that's kind of crazy to say that Clemson's going to be favored in every single game that they play, but they're only projected to go 9-3. They're projected to go 5-3 in those 8 games in the purple and in the white, just because there are so many of those games that are going to be, again, pretty close games more than likely. You average all that out, and yes, the projection does give you a 9-3 record for Clemson. I feel like they're going to do better than that. If you look at the way this, could potentially go down, let's say they go 2-1 against Florida State, Notre Dame, South Carolina. That's going to put them losing 2 games when you count Duke, Syracuse, Miami, NC State, North Carolina. Seems unlikely, but I guess it could happen. Or you flip that around and say they lose 1 of those games. Let's say they lose to Miami or NC State on the road, and then they lose to South Carolina and either Florida State or Notre Dame. So you can see how you could get to 9-3. I think that they're probably at least going to go 10-2. But again, the projected record for Clemson based off of this formula for 2023 is 9-3.